Hello, I wanted to discuss censorship. As I'm sure you know, many people with alternative ideas who speak out against the mainstream and go against what is considered factual, whether they be related to politics, social justice, science of any kind, and so on, often face being criticized, labeled as an unreliable source of information, and are silently censored. That is, unless you were large enough to actually gain more exposure due to the silent censorship that happens on social networks and algorithm modification. When I first started YouTube, I went more along with this mainstream agenda. But now, since I have gotten away from this and am expressing unique views and information, challenging the mainstream ideas we all have been conditioned into believing, then this is a criteria for censorship. I initially thought it was me, and people were increasingly becoming less and less interested in my content. Certainly on some level, this is true. Someone with half the subscribers I have may get 4 times the amount of views I do in 24 hours on new videos. People who do live streams with a quarter of the subscribers that I have may get 5 times the number of viewers as I do. Of course, I'm going to think it's me, but you cannot compare yourself to others. And I say to everyone watching this to stop comparing yourself to others. I know I should not do this. Then I began to think, okay, how can I change my content to engage with my viewers? People said, change your background and setting, go outside, make shorter videos, make personal videos about your life, a myriad of things. I changed the background, sometimes made shorter videos, and people repeated the same thing. My videos have never been about my personal life. Yes, there are some personal videos, but it has never been largely about that. If that is what you are looking for, then you will be unfortunately only be disappointed with future content I make. So I thought it was solely me, as you could see, based on this criteria. While there will be people who love and hate anything I put out, regardless of if it's personal or not, what information I discovered next correlated with how the real problem was censorship. People started telling me that they never got updates from me, not just on YouTube, but also on Facebook. A handful of people, oh, no big deal, right? What if it's a majority of your audience who is blocked from receiving your content? What if it extends even further, in that people who have intentionally set to receive notifications of new videos and live streams are not even notified? Perhaps the website is broken. That's a reasonable excuse. What if when sending out emails to people interested in working with me also don't receive my message? Is this all a bug in the system or something more? There are many obvious signs of censorship that correlated with specific information I've shared online. Back in late 2016 and early 2017, I began to discuss some very controversial topics. Generally, the response was positive, but of course, some people were not happy and unsubscribed. I'm not worried about that since it's understandable. However, from that moment forward, I noticed immediately that my YouTube channels were hit with this cloud of censorship. It seemed to happen to everyone around this time, so I thought it was related to changes being made on YouTube. But it persisted and continued to decline after each controversial video I made. It was almost as if once I started to drift away from this mainstream agenda, that I actually started to expressing my own views, which was not in alignment with this mainstream agenda, then the censorship had to be put in place. Content that would normally get little views is now the ones that are getting the highest views because they are not censored. Why may this be? Often because with the majority of the main content I make, it exposes the agenda that many have been conditioned into believing in our society due to what is considered normal and acceptable. Any content that promotes thought, free thinking, and discussion is censored. Any content that skims the surface and is artificial and materialistic excels. This is censorship to turn people towards dependency, visual stimulation, physical attachments, and materialistic desires. My information exists to combat this so I can help steer people away from these negative energies that are increasingly becoming more and more popular. If you are a follower of mine, I'm sure you can tell how I go against the mainstream thoughts and ideas and promote free thinking and not society brainwashing. The ideas and opinions I have are not that of the popular opinion. One of the biggest things I have expressed very opposing views on is regarding mental health and disorders. While a lot of people benefit from my teachings as I'm all about natural coping mechanisms, there is the mainstream view of mental health disorders caused by a chemical imbalance that requires more chemicals to fix. This is medical science fraud. You can't fix a problem with poison and toxic chemicals that end up causing a chemical imbalance. It was when I started to speak up about alternative ways of coping that censorship came into play. It's manipulated in just a way to promote negativity and a limited perspective of thinking. Since this negativity and limited perspective is promoted and accepted as the mainstream idea and the only truth, it is used against me and people like me to discredit any kind of information because the masses have been conditioned and brainwashed into only believing one side is true. The more I dive into the topic of fraudulence and cover-ups, the more censorship will happen. We are not going to stop. You and I, all of you watching, we are going to go ahead and not hold back anymore. I can play it off and convert to this corrupt way of thinking. I could essentially promote the mainstream agenda on pharmaceutical dependency, become an activist, a feminist, and what would happen? Censorship would be lifted. So why then do people who go against these mainstream ideas and promote alternative ways of thinking face being censored and shut down? Because we have to understand that the dynamic behind these movements and industries. Activism, feminism, any other type of major movement, medical practices, and pharmaceuticals all have a common goal. One is to profit off of brainwashed victims who have been conditioned into falling for some of the biggest lies. All of these are to dumb down society, cause havoc, segregation, and incite violence. I don't focus on activism or feminism, but medicine and mind-altering and dumbing down drugs are of big concern to me. I know some people will turn this around and say that I'm opposing a certain viewpoint and discrediting people who have been helped by these drugs and the science that proves these drugs are safe and effective. If something works for you, fine. I'm not here to change that, and it's none of my concern. But that doesn't mean that there isn't more we should all learn and understand about the industry and dangers that are not so apparent and go far beyond the typical side effects. It's quite shocking to see the number of people and observing them objectively to see the progression and deterioration into a state of believing all the mainstream propaganda after essentially being diagnosed with a mental condition and starting psychiatric medication, believing the doctor knows all and knows best, when the doctor too has been conditioned to believe this false science. Not saying that's the case for everyone, as some people will turn that around too, but there is a real problem here, and it's time we expose it for what it is, to educate others so they can make their own decision and look beyond what is visible on the surface. This is not about changing people's minds, but rather letting the person decide for themselves. The last thing I wish to see are people being brainwashed, mind-controlled zombies, which is clearly how things are heading with the increase of these damaging ways of thinking and practices. Censorship is done because these individuals thought I would not notice or do anything about it, or rather, the way my personality is presented, often calm and subdued, makes me unable to speak up and demand things change. Perhaps that is true. My videos are calm and don't get people all jumbled up and ready to protest. Using that as an advantage, censorship is employed because it appears like that I can do nothing about it, that I cannot stand up and speak my mind, and also because I'm not well known enough for others that follow me to make a big enough fuss to change things. I've seen this happen to many people who are trying to educate and make a difference. Some of them, however, are able to, when the censorship happens, their voice is heard, as well as the people who speak up for them. But of course, still nothing changes. I don't want to be the one who is going to sit back and do nothing and let it all happen. So let's change this and educate. So that is what has been going on with censorship. Everyone has the right to present their views, even if they are the complete opposite of what most of us know as the truth after years of conditioning through education and science. The only way to make a difference is to stand up for what you believe in, no matter how much ridicule you get. If you don't come forward and with information you have, the truth will never be told. Don't let that happen. That is all. Thank you for watching and listening, and I appreciate my loyal followers and viewers. So thank you very much for supporting me. You all have a wonderful day.